kind of all aspects of the workplace. And of course, that's exactly what's happening now. So it's having not just a kind of an iterative kind of impact, it's having a really kind of a revolutionary impact. And I think that impact will, increase, accelerate through next year and the years beyond that. Until in 2030, as Elon Musk would have us believe, all the robots and the machines and the AI will be doing all the work and we'll all be on a universal income. So fantastic. So we'll all be kind of retiring early, essentially, right? I don't think, to be honest, it's going to work out quite like that. But I think Elon Musk is a great dreamer, and he's been able to obviously through that real kind of those big, hairy, audacious goals, that great kind of visionary approach of his, he's been able to deliver a lot of what he's dreamed about. Which is fantastic in a way. But at the same time, I think that we've also got to be I think wary, because there's as much kind of peril as there is promise in this kind of new world of AI and the way it's going to impact talent assessment and development. And that's really what we're going to deep dive into today and talk about how it's going to impact talent assessment and development. And by the way, I'm very conscious that we've got so much expertise in the room today. I'm just looking around at some of the names and so on, and I think we've got just so much expertise. So what I'd like to do is tap into some of that collective intelligence and really share comments as well as questions so that we can all learn from each other, and we'll then share a summary of the session with you all. So let's like really get stuck in, type lots of comments and so on as you processing what you're hearing, as you're kind of making sense of it, any questions coming up for you, and so on. By the way, I'm going to be deliberately, and for those of you who know me, some of you don't know me, but I'm going to be deliberately provocative and ask some really tough questions. And that's not to, be overly critical of, for example, the existing kind of the mainstream personality tools and that sort of thing that are out there. But it's to really ask the questions, the tough questions, in terms of how much relevance will these things have in 2 years' time, or 3 years' time, or 4 years' time, and so on. Because that's my nature. By nature, I'm very curious, and by nature, I'm very challenging. And I think we all need to be curious, and we all need to challenge moving forward, because we're going to be living in a world that's going to be really tough. And really difficult and really challenging. And so we've got to get on top of the stuff, and we've got to be able to adapt and change in ways probably that we haven't adapted and changed in the past, in ways that I think are going to require a different mindset and a different set of sort of capabilities, and a different approach, basically. So as we go through it also, I want you to stretch your minds as well. And hopefully I'll be stretching yours a little bit, because that's what I also like to do. So let's just get up the slides, and hopefully you can all see that. I'm sure Susanna will tell me if you can't. So I've been in the space, as Susanna says, for about 25 years now. And working really at the sort of the cutting edge in terms of new technologies, I suppose, new ways of assessing and developing people. So what we're going to cover is we're going to start off by looking at some of the traditional assessments, and we're going to look at some of the ways in which those are really starting to kind of fall short now in terms of this new world that we're entering. And to ask ourselves the question, to what extent will they still be relevant moving forward? And I'm even going to challenge some of what we're doing at TalentPredix, because I think even what we're doing at TalentPredix, some of that will probably no longer be relevant. For example, the way we're capturing data through questionnaires, I don't think will be relevant in the new world that we're entering. Then we're going to talk about the principles. Sorry, somebody's got their mic on. If you could just mute that, that'd be great. The principles behind next-gen human-centered assessment and development. And we're going to look at how leading organizations are starting to use strengths-based insights to unlock energy, engagement, and performance. And we'll share some case studies, because that's obviously our area of specialization. And then we're going to look at how you can take practical steps to start modernizing your assessment and development strategy for the future work. So just introducing who we are. So we an organization that essentially has a leading next generation strengths assessment and development platform, as well as a whole lot of solutions to unleash exceptional talent and thriving workplaces. And we do that through the latest psychological science, combined with strengths-based strategies. And that's designed to unlock potential, passion, and peak performance, which is so relevant in today's world because the data would suggest that the UK workforce is one of the most disengaged in Europe and the world at the moment. So we're not doing very well in terms of engagement. So how can we improve engagement? And how can we actually improve productivity and peak performance, which is also suffering? And really, it's about helping people grow, thrive, and adapt in this new digital age. How can we make sure that people are at the heart of this change and that it's always people that are put first when we're thinking about this change? Because we know through looking at a lot of the surveys, and I was looking at the surveys recently again, that CEOs, they are most focused on obviously profitable growth in these difficult times, and it's going to get even more difficult, I would predict, next year than it is now. So I think the economy is going to be really tough moving into 2026, and probably, hopefully it'll get better moving into 2027. But in this tough economy, I think we are going to really need to focus on how to enable people to grow, thrive, and adapt. And fortunately, I think CEOs get that. They also, though, want that transformation, and they want the efficiencies and the cost savings and the productivity improvements that the human AI combination, that partnership can bring. So that is something we definitely are exploring and taking forward with clients. So in terms of how we actually do this, well, we've got, you can see that middle row there. Those are our assessment solutions. So we do it across the talent lifecycle: hiring talent, developing talent, optimizing teams, accelerating change. We've got our assessment solutions, and I'm not going to talk in detail through all those solutions, but we've got self-assessments, we've got 360 assessments, we've got team assessments, and we've actually got qualitative assessments as well. So it's not just our quantitative assessments, our qualitative, for example, our interview process that we use, and our qualitative 360 leadership assessment that we use. So we've got those products. In addition, we've got all the products and solutions to develop and optimize strengths and skills in the workplace and create highly adaptive, thriving workplaces, inclusive workplaces as well. And then we've got lots of different solutions to sustain all of that. So I thought we could start off with a nice sort of poll in relation to getting into the topic, which is really looking at how future ready you feel your organization, or your clients' organizations, obviously, because I'm conscious that many of you are in consulting. So how future ready is your organization or your client's organization in terms of its assessment and development approach? So if you could go into a Slido using your laptop or your mobile phone, and you can just go into it through that website address and then just pop in the number. Okay, so let's just look at what's coming up. Okay, so almost 2/3 of people saying not very ready. We rely mostly on traditional methods, which is something we assumed because a lot of organizations, when we go out there and when we talk to organizations, when we talk to clients, prospects, and so on, they seem to be relying significantly on traditional methods, which were developed, sometimes over 50 years ago. And it's a little bit like, kind of using the old, analog phone in the digital age, or certainly, using a BlackBerry in an age where, everyone's using an iPhone. I don't think anyone would consider using a BlackBerry nowadays. So that's kind of the analogy, right? We're relying on these very kind of traditional methods, and we need to kind of move on and obviously ensure that we're equipped with the latest technologies and the latest methods in order to kind of move forward. So lots of opportunity by the looks of things to shift and change. So just in terms of the context for what's happening, a little bit in relation to AI and some of those technological changes, and I call those adaptive challenges. These are big adaptive challenges, right? So I put this together a while ago to help clients understand some of the seismic shifts that are happening in the workplace. And I think we've got four major areas, and we shouldn't just see AI as the challenge, because there's other challenges as well. We've got the purpose challenge, which is a lot of people are really searching for purpose and meaning, and they're not feeling that organization and society is providing them with that purpose and meaning. So that's a big challenge, and we shouldn't forget about that. We shouldn't forget also about the big talent challenge, particularly how we can engage and get the best out of talent, and ensure that people are feeling connected with their work, and people are feeling excited to come into work. And that's just not happening at the moment, particularly not in the UK, as we talked about. We also have got the productivity challenge, where productivity is not just flatlining, but in many cases it's declining. And we're losing out to productivity advances, for example, in the developing economies, places like China, Vietnam, India, and that sort of thing. So we've got a lot of work to do to improve productivity, and that relates to some of those talent challenges as well, in terms of, and purpose challenges, in terms of getting people engaged and excited and aligned with the organization kind of higher purpose and goals. But we focusing today on the adaptive challenge around AI, and we can see, here that the pace, of course, is unprecedented and accelerating. I was in Lisbon for the AI Summit this year. I was blown away. There were 80,000 odd people there. I was blown away by how dynamic and youthful and kind of optimistic it was, in terms of all the different possibilities and just the broad range of applications for AI. That absolutely blew me away. The exhibition space was about 3 or 4 times XL, and it was just full of exhibitors and obviously sessions talking about how the world's going to change through AI. So we need to ask, in that world, are those talent models that we rely on, and we have relied on for so long, are they still fit for purpose? Are they keeping up? And I just want to share with you something that I've always kind of held very close, which is something I came across early in my career in HR, which is this great equation that the rate of learning has to be equal to or greater than the rate of change. And if we are not learning faster than the rate of change, or equal to the rate of change, then we're going to fall behind quite quickly. And our organization is going to fall behind, and that's going to undermine our talent advantage. It's going to undermine productivity, performance, profitability, all those sorts of things. So AI is having this massive impact on work, and it's having it across the full cycle of the way that individuals and teams and organizations work. And this is the Deming PDCA model, and most of you will know it. So it breaks down work into, we have to plan work, we have to do it, we have to review it or check it, and then we have to adapt or act on that review and improve. And you can see here that AI is going to profoundly impact every single stage of the cycle. So, if you look at, for example, planning, we've planned in a very static, reactive way in the past. It's going to be very real-time, dynamic. It's going to be much more intelligent, because it's going to have much better data analytics. So planning is going to massively improve with the new technologies. Not just generative AI, but agentic AI. I can give you an example of that from an individual perspective. I think that, you will have your coach in your pocket in future, and that coach in the pocket will help you plan the next month's development, basically journey, and will give you nudges on a regular basis. And that's, happening at the moment, but it'll happen even more over the course of the next few years. And so there's a whole lot of things that are gonna shift, for example, in that planning area. If we just look at, I'm not gonna look at all these because you can see for yourself, but if we look at the do area, I think this is really interesting, because in the past we've relied very much on human effort and maybe with some assistance from our peers and our manager and that sort of thing. But now we've got AI augmented performance. And what does that actually mean? Well, it means that at every step of the way, we're going to have our AI kind of agent, which is going to be helping us. And I've watched a demo recently of a very powerful agentic kind of bot that was essentially able to dial out to people and sell them solutions. And that bot could be adapted in all sorts of different ways. And that's like in 2025. So imagine what it's going to be like in 2026 or 2028, right? It's going to be phenomenal in terms of the leaps forward. So I don't think we can underestimate the power of AI augmented performance, and that sort of augmenting that kind of human capability and human talent. So let's just move on then and just zoom in here in terms of traditional assessment and why my assertion is that it's no longer working for us, and particularly in this very fast changing kind of unpredictable world we're moving into. Well, first of all, traditional assessment is largely still based on rewarding past experience qualifications rather than future readiness. We know, and I heard this again at the Web Summit from lots of CEOs and thought leaders and so on, that adaptability and learning is going to be the number one characteristic and behavior that people are going to have to grow, develop, and they're going to have this growth mindset moving forward, and not assume that they can rest on their laurels, and that knowledge is power, because knowledge is no longer power. Knowledge is being democratized. Content and knowledge are increasingly democratized, and everyone's going to have access to that. So we've got to recognize that past experience, past qualifications is much less important than some of these kind of power skills, particularly adaptability and learning and curiosity. We've also got to move away from reducing people to labels, because in this world which we're moving into is going to be hyper personalized, if I'm assessing Sarah's going to want me to know everything about her and how her personality plays out across different contexts. So we've really got to understand those unique differences and potential. Sarah's not going to be called a yellow or a blue or a ENTJ or whatever the case may be. We've got to use some of these really kind of powerful tools now, these new tools, to really kind of understand how behaviors, how motivations, how values play out in different contexts. Because somebody who's an extrovert in one context, let's face it, they can be an introvert in another. Somebody who's conscientious in one context can be less conscientious in another context. So we've got to move away from these very kind of rigid, sort of ways of pigeonholing people. And that's not to say that they don't have value. So I have used MBTI, and I've used Insights, I've used these different tools in the past and so on, and I think they have value. But I think increasingly they're going to have less value. And I would suggest, and by the way, this is a subjective view, and this is one of my contentious views, but I would suggest in 5 years' time, we will no longer be using any of these tools, because we will have much more sophisticated tools. So my view is that, for example, with talent assessment, if you had to say, James, what's the 5-year picture of talent assessment? Well, I believe that we're going to be talking to a bot, a very intelligent bot. That bot's going to have conversations with us over the period of a couple of weeks, and it's going to know us better than our partners know us. And it's going to be able to give us, very personalized recommendations, development nudges, pointers, and so on of how we can develop, how we can move forward. So I don't even think we're going to be collecting data, assessment data, using questionnaires anymore. So that's for example, how I think things are going to change. We need to stop looking kind of backwards and looking at these things as static traits, because these things are dynamic. And I think in an increasingly fast-paced world, I think we'll see personality shift more. We'll see people change more. There's a lot of research on neuroplasticity and our ability to change even into our kind of our latter years, right? And I think that's only going to increase, with the advent of kind of AI and the kind of the fast changing world we're moving into. We've got to also recognize that a lot of these old approaches really amplify human bias. They pretend to be objective, but actually they're reinforcing the same old models. For example, Big Five model of personality. If those of you who don't know it, we can send out some information on the Big Five personality model. Now, the Big Five is the basis of many of the current assessments out there. But it's inherently biased. And one of the reasons it's inherently biased is because a lot of the research done on the Big Five model is done to reinforce the validity of the Big Five model. But there's actually very little by way of predictive studies to show that it adds any value whatsoever to helping us understand performance and potential and growth. So this is something that I particularly feel that needs to be really kind of unpacked more, and we need to also challenge kind of the Big Five more as the basis for some of these quite rigid static tools. And then finally, the last point here is we need to be generating more valuable hiring insights that can be used across development, performance, and succession. But what we typically do, what I see a lot of organizations do, is they collect great insights at the hiring stage, and then they're never applied at the development, performance, and succession planning stages, and workforce analytics stages, and that sort of thing. So I think we need to increasingly use those insights from the hiring process in the latter stages of the talent development cycle. Or the talent life cycle, not just the development cycle, talent life cycle. So AI can provide a real strategic talent advantage for us. It can do so through being an efficiency multiplier and decision booster. So for example, many organizations, many of our clients already are using AI for things like scheduling interviews efficiently, for doing the sifting, matching, obviously the initial matching to the job descriptions and so on. And that can really kind of help us, right? But it shouldn't be the ultimate decision maker. The human should be the ultimate decision maker. And unfortunately, already we're seeing some examples where people are relying too much on AI to make those kind of final decisions. It also can help close that gap between insights and real world impact. So, for example, in terms of the insights that we get at the moment, like with an MBTI, there's often absolutely no real world impact from that. There's no kind of application to performance improvement or application to succession readiness or anything else. Now, AI can help us with that. Through better data analytics and through giving people more personalized, curated development plans and that sort of thing. It's a very powerful tool. It is a tool, but obviously we've got to ensure implementation is thoughtful, staged, and ethical, because there's all sorts of problems and issues. There's a lot of pitfalls that not enough people are talking about, and we'll talk about some of those pitfalls during this particular webinar. The other thing that is important is the real value around AI comes from the combination of the human judgment and the machine intelligence, not just the machine intelligence or the human judgment. We've got to bring those together. We've got to have that augmented intelligence. And that's really kind of what we're looking for there. That's that kind of last point there, that what we really want this AI to do is augment us, rather than replace us. And already I see lots of examples of what I call lazy use of AI, which is like relying too much on the AI agents, the machines, to make our decisions for us, whether that's generating a letter or a regrets letter, for example, to an applicant. Because a lot of people are doing that now. They're just getting standard letters being sent out, regret letters saying no thank you, not on this occasion, and they're all standardized, and that's not the way to do it. What we've got to do is we've got to have some human intervention to maybe write the letter, and then to get AI to maybe put it in a more professional kind of way that's more constructive and so on. So that would be a good example there of not just relying on the machines. So how is AI changing talent assessment? Well, I think we've talked about some of these points already, but definitely allowing more inclusive and personalized approaches instead of those kind of one size fits all models. And I think that is going to, as I say, significantly evolve in the next even few years, where assessment will be much more personalized, and we won't be using approaches that involve generic labeling. We'll use approaches that are collecting data, analyzing data, and providing feedback and insights, which are highly personalized and highly curated. And that's what I think we need to do with humans, because humans don't fit it easily into boxes, in my experience. They don't fit into one of 16 categories or one of 4 colors. Yeah. I think that's way, way too simplistic. Also, we're going to see a lot more dynamic mapping of skills and strengths, and we're already seeing that across roles, teams, and the organization. And we're already doing that with clients, where we can map different strengths and say, well, how can we use these strengths across these different projects, these different assignments, in relation to delivering that organization strategy, and adding real value to their customers. So it's going to be much more kind of performance oriented, and much more about using an analytical approach, which is highly contextualized as well. I think the next point is a really important one, because through this advanced behavioral data collection, and we can collect data not just in terms of what the person's saying, how the person's writing, for example, application letters and things like that. But also we can obviously collect data around feelings, and we can sentiment. We can collect data now using AI around energy shifts. We can collect all sorts of different data. So the possibilities are really kind of quite endless, actually, in terms of how we can collect that data now, and then how we can also analyze it at scale, and use it for not just recruitment, selection, onboarding, development, succession management, career mobility, those sorts of things, but really use it also for workforce planning at scale, so we can identify even before those gaps appear, what gaps might appear based on how the market's moving, how the organization's moving, what the organization needs in future, and so on. And so I think that's going to be extremely powerful. Also, I think one of the big shifts, and I'm really pleased to see this, is that we're going to be moving from really a lot of kind of correlational studies towards more predictive studies, and also looking at how assessment data predicts performance and potential in context, and that's really important. So rather than just saying, well, somebody's a particular color, or somebody's a particular one of these kind of got one of these 5 personality traits, we can actually say, well, what does that mean, and what does that look like in context, and how's that likely to play out, and what are the upsides and what are the risks of that, and what potential might that person have, and how can we align that potential with one of the career pathways, or certainly offer individuals different career pathways, rather than just saying, well, there's only 2 or 3 different options. Maybe there's 20 options, maybe there's 30 options for that individual. And I think that's going to be incredibly powerful. We're already seeing a lot of shift in immersive simulations, gamified assessments, and some great companies out there like Arctic Shores. I can give a big shout out for them in terms of immersive simulations, gamified assessments, because I think that AI enables us to recreate environments in a very realistic way, recreate parts of jobs that, and doing it in a fun, enjoyable way as well, where we're going to see what the individuals are really capable of. And I know a lot of organizations now using, for example, simulations to assess people, and it's a great way to assess people, because one of the best ways to assess people is to see how they actually how they perform their capabilities in a real life situation, right? And then lastly, definitely greater emphasis on distinctively what we call power skills, or those transferable skills, those human skills. And this was one thing, again, that was coming up at the Web Summit, and it's come up elsewhere, other sort of conferences, events I've been to, involving kind of AI, digital change and so on, which is that these power skills like adaptability, empathy, emotional intelligence, in the leadership skills, collaboration, problem solving, these are going to become even more important. Because these are the things that AI doesn't do particularly well. Right?
James, before you continue, we have a question in the chat from Mark regarding the point you made on collecting data on feelings. The question is it still mainly based on self-report questionnaires or some other ways we are doing that?
No, increasingly, I mean, even when you're doing an interview now, using an AI plugin, and we use, for example, Otter, that will do a sentiment analysis in terms of the feelings that are expressed during that conversation, using Zoom or using Teams or whatever the case may be. So, and there are, like, HireView is using sentiment analysis as well, looking at emotion, looking at energy shifts and so on. And I think this is really important, that we should be looking at these things, because, if somebody's getting excited by an opportunity we're talking about, then we should be measuring that, right? And sometimes it's difficult to measure because some people show that excitement in a more visible, open way than others. But still, the tools that we're going to use, the AI tools, are going to become more and more evolved and refined, and they'll be able to see those shifts, and they'll be able to combine the words with the body language and the emotion, and will be able to tell us, is Susanna, even though she's quite a shy, introverted person, is she actually getting excited about that particular opportunity when I talk to her about that?
Cool. Thanks, James.
Pleasure. I just wanted to briefly touch on this because I'm conscious of time, and I wanted to leave enough time for Q&A. But we are moving away from more static job descriptions and roles to dynamic skills and strengths. And so we should be thinking about organizations as very fluid, very dynamic. And what we should be doing right at the get-go is identifying, mapping those skills and those strengths that are really important for organizations in order to deliver their strategy, both for next year, but then in the future. And then really kind of focusing on those, and assessing for those, and then allocating people based on their strengths and skills to different projects. So we should be thinking about work as a bunch of projects basically that need to be done. Because if we're thinking of it still as static roles, we're going to be highly disillusioned, because certainly in a year's time or in 2 years' time, those roles are going to start actually breaking down, and already we're seeing that, right? So for many of our clients, for example, if they put together a job description, that job description is going to have changed in 3 months' time or in 6 months' time. So we've got to be thinking about this in a different way, in a much more fluid, in a much more dynamic way, and matching strengths and skills to projects and internal opportunities, and looking at organizational design as more project-based, and those projects obviously relate to what value needs to be delivered to the customers, essentially. So things like role crafting, job crafting becomes also more important, where we can craft a role or a job much more to the skills and the strengths that people bring. And a lot of very progressive organizations in tech and digital are already doing this, and to great effect as well. I'm probably not going to do this because I'm just conscious of time, and I'd rather do the questions. But I was just going to ask you what sort of challenges you're seeing around AI, and of course one of the biggest ones that I think a lot of people are already talking about is what we call the bias paradox, right? So AI can reduce bias, or it can magnify bias, and that's the kind of the bottom line. And it's all about how we, first of all, training the AI models, how we training the tools, and also then how we applying them, which is absolutely critical here. And so the data quality of the model design become absolutely imperative. We need also to ensure transparency, explainability, kind of that regular auditing. And the bias can actually appear also through that unequal access, the data gaps, digital fluency. So I'll give you a great example of this, actually. There was some research done, which I thought was fabulous, where they looked at organizations that were using, kind of AI for selection purposes. And what was interesting is that the fact that AI was being used by those organizations was actually introducing an unintended bias. And that bias was, and this has been kind of replicated across sort of different, different contexts. That bias was that people would actually deliberately focus more on the analytical traits and the analytical skills, rather than the human skills, because they thought that that's what AI would be looking for. So isn't that fascinating? So what you're doing is you're creating an unintended bias simply because you're using AI, and you're not telling people, you're not being transparent, you're not being open with people about the fact that actually those human skills, those power skills are really important for your organization as well. So we've got to recognize that there can also be a lot of unintended bias, unintended consequences that happen through even introducing AI, for example, in a hiring context. Like, for instance, it can change your candidate behavior. And of course, a lot of candidates are now using AI. So you're getting like a convergence, a homogeneity of responses because they're using AI for their, they're looking at the job description, and they're using it for their cover letter, they're using it for their CV and so on, and some of you may even be helping them to do that. So it's distorting, how they're presenting in favor of those more kind of analytical skills and traits, rather than those kind of those power skills and traits that we talked about earlier. And the other thing is evaluative bias, which is a bias that is really about the subjective feelings and perceptions that we bring into the way that we not just look at people and assess people, but in the way we actually look at AI. Because if you've got, for example, a hiring manager who really believes in AI, then they'll put a huge emphasis on the AI recommendation. But if they really don't believe in AI, then they will just be totally dismissive. Now that's called evaluative bias. So that is compounding the bias that is already built into the system because of the way that the system is taught. So we've got to be kind of aware of these things and aware of these different kind of levels and types of bias. And of course, a very poor AI experience, if you're getting just a kind of a standard, cold response to your application from, kind of an AI applicant tracking system, that can really damage trust, and it can really damage candidate perception. So we would always recommend the best approach is to use AI in combination with the human, of course, for that sort of thing. Just a few words by way of talking about talent development in the age of AI, and I haven't, we haven't got a lot to add to probably what most of you already know in relation to what's happening. But we are going to be moving towards much more hyper personalized growth journeys. Absolutely. So if you're a coach or if you're a consultant, you've got to be thinking about how can you ensure that using AI and experimenting with AI. And so, for example, even with our profiling, we often together with the coaching client, we'll be using with them the AI technologies, ChatGPT or Gemini, whatever the case may be, to actually personalize their development plans and to come up with a really nice development plan based on their LinkedIn profile, their experience, but also based on their TalentPredix profile. So it's important to start using these approaches and experimenting with these approaches if you haven't done so already. I'm not going to say too much more about that because I think we've talked about a lot of the points up here. I think just having a look here. Yeah, I think we talked about. I mean, I think the thing I do want to say a little bit more about is that we are going to be looking a lot more at these human capabilities, and that's is still being unpacked. And it's quite interesting because the CEOs I've heard talking about this, they don't really understand what human capabilities. They say, well, we know that some human capabilities are going to be more important in the future in this future world of AI, but we're not quite sure which ones. And so they're trying to work this out, right? And I think it is things like creativity, empathy, problem solving, and collaboration. And we've got a view of this, which I'll talk about later. So I just want to get on to also thinking about a little bit about performance and potential in future and unpacking that. And the way that we look at this is we are obviously a strengths-based organization, and we think it's really important that people understand their strengths, because strengths are really kind of underlying patterns of qualities or patterns of behavior and thought which enable us to do our best work. So it's not just enable us to do work, it's enabling us to do our best work, right? So these are things that we energize by, we're passionate about, and passion and energy is going to become even more important in the age of AI, right? So we've really got to understand those underlying talents, motivators, and values. But that's not sufficient to be able to generate high levels of performance. So what do we have to do? Well, we have to develop skills, both job related, but also what we calling self-mastery skills, the power skills. So we call the power skills the self-mastery skills. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then we need to give people stretch opportunities, and we need to create that supportive environment for them to be able to be at their best. And for different people, different support, is appropriate, right? And different stretch is appropriate. So what is going to be positively stretching for people? What is going to really take them out of their comfort zone in a positive way, in a way that aligns with their strengths, their motivations, and their values. Okay. And we know that this approach works, and there's been a few decades of research about this approach now, and this is kind of a summary of the research, that it results in higher levels of satisfaction, engagement, well-being, elevated customer experiences, and excellent customer and business outcomes. So it's like a virtuous cycle that arises when you start focusing on people's strengths, when you start focusing on successes, you start focusing on skills, and you build skills in areas of strength. One of the problems I have with just talking about a skill-based organization that many organizations are talking about at the moment, they're talking about skill-based organization, is, well, skills are kind of a fairly dry and don't excite people. Yeah, so we've got to look beyond skills, and we've got to say, well, what are people really passionate about? What do they love to do? And what's interesting is virtually every single successful business person and performing artist, professional athlete, elite athlete, and so on, they always talk about the importance of, doing what you love to do if you want to be excellent. You've got to do what you love to do. So we've got to help people understand where their real opportunities for excellence are. What is it that they love to do? And then I think we'll get much higher levels of engagement, and we'll get much higher levels of performance and productivity out of people. So this is what we're all about, right? We unlock people's full potential, and we do that through helping them understand their strengths, their motivations, career motivations, and their values. So that's essentially what we do. And we've got self-assessments, 360, and team profile. So we measure these kind of three things. We're the only strengths assessment in the market today worldwide that measures these three things. But we also measure the overused talents. And there's a lot of research, compelling research, to suggest that people don't usually fail because of competency weaknesses. People fail when they're using their talents and their strengths too much or in the wrong way. So boldness becomes recklessness, or precision becomes perfectionism, or decisiveness becomes being rushed or over hasty, right? So we've got to also help people to understand this overuse, these blind spots, which are these kind of overused risks. And the more we can help people understand that, the more we're going to get out of them. And the interesting thing is, I still think only about 5 to 10% of people in the market today, the employees, actually understand their overused risks. So we've got to do a better job as, psychologists and coaches and consultants, people consultants, and so on, to help people understand their overused risks. And TalentPredix goes into a lot of detail about these. And so how are we different from the personality tests out there? Well, it relates to what I was saying earlier, and I'll just bring all these points up because personality tests really describe personality preferences and behaviors under normal conditions. So all your big five tests, which are most of the personality tests in the market today, they describe your behavior under normal conditions. They sort people into these general personality types and categories. They don't offer any real value in predicting performance and potential. There's no compelling predictive studies that I know of relating to performance and potential. And they don't offer much insight about overused talents and behaviors that can sabotage performance and relationships. Of course, TalentPredix and other strengths assessments are different because what they're measuring is they're measuring, particularly TalentPredix, because TalentPredix is the only one that measures the three kind of key human success factors: talents, motivations, and values. So it spotlights people's unique strengths and differences, and the chances of getting the same combination of talents, motivations, and values is one in several million. So it's very unlikely that you're going to get the same, talents, motivations, and values as other people. Unlike, being put into a box where it says you are yellow or a blue or whatever the case may be. Well, people want to feel that they can express themselves in a very unique, differentiated way, and people, of course, are very different. And that those differences show up in different ways in different contexts. I think we've talked about that. It also obviously is providing the opportunity to make predictions about performance and potential. Because if we know people's talents, motivations, and values, then we can make better predictions and we can build up the data sets that enable us to do that. And then also it provides those actionable insights for those blind spots that we talked about, the overused talents. So that's really important. But let's just talk a little bit about the self-mastery piece, because I just wanted to talk before we jump into some questions, because these we feel, and we've developed this particular assessment as part of our 360 assessment suite. We feel that these are the key power skills based on a lot of research that are going to be important moving forward in this age, this age of AI. So we've landed on these eight areas, these eight skill areas that we feel everybody can learn, every employee can learn these, and everybody can become better at these. And we need to measure these. We need to assess where people are now, what areas they need to develop in, and how they can help them develop. So these are the kind of the eight areas that we've landed on, because we feel that organizations are really struggling to get a handle on this. And HR have been very good at talking about several of these, but never all of them together. So, we hear them talking about emotional intelligence, or we hear them talking about resilience, or we hear them talking about self-care and well-being, but we never hear them talking about everything together. So we've created a holistic skills-based tool to measure these power skills, these self-mastery skills, to help people to thrive, adapt, and grow. And that we feel is really important, particularly for staff who are maybe also, for all staff, but particularly staff maybe who are a little bit younger, and staff who are virtual as well. And for example, recognizing the need for things like resourcefulness and communicating with impact and things like that. I'm not going to talk too much about this because this is more about how we help people develop and optimize their talents. I'd rather get into the questions. So, and we feel that, in terms of practical steps to get started, well, it's really about, first of all, starting by auditing your current assessment development approaches. Are they fit for purpose? Are they still going to be relevant in 2 or 3 years' time? Do we need to start thinking about alternative approaches? Do we need to start experimenting, maybe having some pilots of some different approaches? And I think it's really important to not just plug in something, but really look at saying, well, are there areas where we really need to start over? We really need to kind of reinvent. But obviously, before you do that, you could start with a pilot, and then you could scale it further from there. I think moving beyond those role-based frameworks to more skill and strengths-based frameworks that we talked about, really important, I think, is a shift to ensure a more kind of agile, dynamic approach in terms of both organizational design, but also in terms of capability building and unlocking engagement. And then, piloting AI for sure. Everyone should be piloting AI, experimenting with it, being curious about it, trying it out, and so on, in order to increase the value that they're getting throughout the talent life cycle, particularly from, obviously the assessment and development sides of things. And then establishing those clear ethical guidelines. So there needs to be ethical guidelines in terms of how we're going to actually, ensure that some of this bias that we talked about is mitigated, is effectively managed. So some of those risks are reduced, because that's really important, and governance from the outset. By the way, I think every organization should have in place guidelines for how to use AI effectively, because many organizations don't. And then they find that their employees are using it in very kind of lazy ways, inappropriate ways, ineffective ways, whatever the case may be. And then they're like, oh, well, we didn't want our employees to use it in that way, but did you actually set some expectations? Did you set some guidelines? Did you tell them? Well, we need to tell them. We need to help them understand how to use it and get the best out of it, to avoid inappropriate use, ineffective use, or bias, as we talked about. And then last but not least, I think is that whole thing about, the transparency, the informed consent, and the accountability. Because without that transparency, helping people understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, why it's important, their role in it, how they can make it work in their particular part of the business. That's really important. But also that informed consent. If you're gathering data about people, then you've got to ask for consent. So, for example, before you're using AI in an interview, an AI plug-in tool in an interview, you've got to get that informed consent, right? And then that accountability piece is also important. Okay, Q&A.
Also, if anyone any questions, you can also unmute yourself or drop a question in the chat, but feel free to also just talk to us.
Just to pick up on a point you made, James, and it's not a question, it's just, I guess, a reinforcement around the importance of understanding oversupply. So, I'm thinking especially around one of my traits on my TalentPredix assessment is around bold. And I look back in my murky past, and I see the times when I've overplayed that, and gone into meetings with my line managers with a forthright opinion, shall we say, is probably the most gentle way of putting that, and effing and jeffing and not putting myself. And what that does is you've lost the debate before you've even started the debate, because you've gone in with a very strident method, a very, very outspoken point of view. So straight away, you've put yourself on the back foot. So one of the things that I really, really like is that ability to be able to understand oversupply. I think that's a key trait of your assessment.
That overuse is so important, isn't it, Stephen? And what's interesting is that I guess some of the feedback that you may have heard, in the same way I heard it earlier in my career, was not very pleasant, shall we say. So people would say to me, well, James, maybe you shouldn't be so kind of rash and forthright, or whatever the case may be. And if somebody had reframed it for me, and somebody had said to me, and one of the strategies we always talk about with, for example, courage and boldness overused, we always say, well, you know what? It's as simple as signaling to people, signaling that you're going to be forthright and bold. So in situations, what I mean by that is you can simply say to somebody, you know what? I'm going to be really challenging deliberately, because I think we all need to ask the tough questions here. Yeah. And then once you've signaled and you've framed what you're going to do, people will respond much more positively, because they'll go, you know what? This person's asking some great questions.
Yeah.
Or this person's making some great challenges. So sometimes the strategies to mitigate those overplayed or overused strengths are relatively straightforward and incredibly powering for people. But unless you have a positive way of identifying those blind spots and those overused patterns and dealing with them, then you're stuck with them, and they can be quite damaging to parts of your career.
Yeah.
So that's why we also feel it's really, really important that everyone, I'm on a personal mission, by the way, that everyone should understand what their overplayed or overused strengths are in the workplace, because they are the biggest sources of career derailment. We know that. That's been established through research. So how can we mitigate those? How can we help people understand those blind spots? I think that's critical. Yeah. Any other points?
I see Natasha has her hand up. Oh, there we go.
Hi, James.
Hi, Natasha.
So the work that I do at the moment is with a lot of people who are, feeling the effects of, not many, well, the decreasing number of jobs available. Also, technology is changing the world of work, and I can definitely see everything that you've talked about in terms of how quickly technology is changing and how I see so many people being left behind. And a lot of the people that I help don't have basic technology skills. So I'm just thinking there's so much value in finding people's strengths and using AI and sort of strengths-based assessments for helping people, not basing assessments on previous experience and qualifications and rather focusing on what people can do and what their potential is. But how do we get people ready for being assessed in this way and potentially, having an interview done by AI, and sort of just matching people or getting people ready for this massive change where they will be expected to use these sort of tools for their job search?
I love the question, Natasha, because I think it is about helping people with that transition. And some people, like me, are quite comfortable being early adopters, and they dive in and they learn about, kind of all the different new technologies and what's happening and start applying and that sort of thing. And other people are much more reluctant for a variety of reasons, because there's fear, there's lack of familiarity, there's they may be more conservative about change and so on. So they're more the conservers. We talk about the early adopters, the kind of the change trailblazers and the conservers, right? So the conservers, how do we help them? I think we've got to help them to feel comfortable and safe to make those changes. And so I think, insofar as possible, we've got to get them to sort of dip their feet in the water and really kind of, coach them, and to give them kind of safe ways to experiment.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, it might be that they themselves go through, if they're out of a job, for example, they themselves go through a mock interview, which is done using AI.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can give them that feedback, and then they can see, what's coming up from the AI analysis of that interview. And it could be things like, getting them to do a trial, TalentPredix, and then going through the profile and then integrating the LinkedIn profile with that to come up with a nice kind of AI development plan. Yeah. Which is very easy to do. So those sorts of things, Natasha, I think make people feel more comfortable. And then they go, oh, that's interesting. I want to, I want to learn more about that, and I want to try that a little bit more. But and of course, there's a lot of free courses out there as well. For example, prompt engineering for AI, most of the courses now are actually free of charge. And you've got some of the best, the best organizations in the US offering free courses on prompt engineering. So it doesn't even need to cost us anything. It's just about that growth mindset and allocating the time and the space and having the support network to help you through that transition.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. And I think creating that safe space and sort of encouraging them to not be scared and to not trust, because I think there are still stigmas from previous, personality assessments or how assessments have kept people out of the workforce in the past, potentially, that are creeping in and making people scared. So Yeah.
Yeah, and saying it's fine to be fearful, but we have to lean into our fears. You know, I always say to people, we have to get out our comfort zone. We have to lean into our fears in order to overcome our fears. It's the only way to overcome your fear is to lean into it. And it might be just a kind of a small lean in initially, and then a much bigger lean in later. But I mean, I was talking to somebody who was experiencing job transition, and he was talking to me about, you know, because he's a learner, right? And he said, you know, I'm starting to learn vibe coding because I know that vibe coding is going to be huge in future. And I would totally agree with them, right? If you know how to code using vibe coding, now vibe coding is basically low code, no code coding, right? So you're using essentially text prompts to code. Now, if you know how to do that, you're really going to stand out in the future market, right? And there are all sorts of courses out there, paid and free courses to learn how to vibe code. Yeah. Or you can teach yourself to vibe code. So it's really kind of being curious about these things and getting stuck in and learning about these things.
Brilliant. I don't know if we have, I don't think we have any more questions in the chat outside of comments. So unless there's any other questions, I'm just going to share one last slide as well. Give me 1 second. Because obviously, you know, after this discussion and leaning a bit more also into the strength-based approach, which we believe is fitted for the future of work, we'd love for you to experience it free of charge. And all you have to really do is to scan the QR code. I'll also leave a link in the chat if that's easier. And you just put in your email address and the redeem code, and you can do the TalentPredix assessment free of charge and just see what it's like and see the value for yourself. And once you complete it and you want to fully understand your profile and explore it further, we're happy to set up a video debrief with one of our assessment specialists and just help you fully understand the insights provided in the assessment. So yeah, you can.
Can I also suggest, by the way, that we've got a guide of AI prompts to actually be able to further apply the insights from the resulting report that you'll get. So if you could share that as well, Susanna, because I think once they've done the assessment, then we'll obviously do a debrief for those who haven't yet had a debrief. But also those AI prompts, they're just fascinating to use and to start playing with, because you can also put a link to your LinkedIn profile and that sort of thing. And
yeah, no, definitely. We'll send it.
You can get some really rich insights, some very, very rich insights in terms of your development, next steps, your risks, your upside potential, new opportunities you haven't thought about, all sorts of things. We do that for clients all the time, and they absolutely love it. So
Yep. So we'll share the document with the prompts in a follow-up email after the session, including the code and the link for the free trial for anyone who didn't get a chance to scan the QR code. And obviously, if you love the assessment and you want to start using it in your practice, in your organization, for everyone who attended today's session, there's a discount of 33% on getting trained and using our tool, and that works for you individually, but also if you want to get your team trained in-house, we can run a certification program for you, and the discount still applies. So that's valid until end of this year. So you don't have to worry about it for now. We'll remember about the discount offer when we run your debrief, but definitely the first step would be to just try out the assessment and actually see it in action rather than just hearing about it. So yeah, we'll send it to you and I'll share it in the chat as well. But I think that's all, unless you wanted to add anything, James.
It must be almost Christmas because marketing is offering these big discounts, right?
It is almost Christmas, hence hence the discount.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you very much all for attending. This is a fascinating topic. Nobody's got all the answers. Nobody knows what's really going to be happening because you can't predict the future. But what we can do is we can work together you know, to work through it and to build solutions that are appropriate for this kind of age of AI. So let's keep the conversation going, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for attending. We really appreciate the time you've set aside today to attend. Thank you.
Thanks, James.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Susanna.
Thanks for joining.